Chapter 1. The cheerful font on her "Hello, I'm Single" name tag was doing nothing to improve Tessa Smith's mood. 3 minutes into her first speed date, Tessa realized that entrepreneur was apparently code for "I trade meme cryptocurrency in my grandmother's basement." Halfway through her second date, she watched in real time as the man across from her wrote "Nope" next to her name with all the subtlety of a neon billboard. And when her third date plopped down before her, one who clearly had a liberal interpretation of the event's 25 to 35 age range, Tessa decided this was going to be a long evening. Sweet Rachel, Tessa's best friend, had organized tonight's romantic disaster. Tessa resolved to hate her for the next 45 minutes, just as she had through the previous 4 events she'd been dragged to by Rachel. As she watched the man in front of her pick his teeth while staring below her clavicle, Tessa wondered why she'd picked the world's kindest woman for a best friend. If she'd been smart, she would have picked someone horrendous. Then, whenever an extra person was needed for speed dating, she could have yelled no and stayed home watching Gilmore Girls reruns guilt-free. Not that Rachel would ever guilt her. If Tessa ever needed something, Rachel would drop everything without hesitation to help. So now, Tessa was trudging through a marathon of uninspired dates again. A bell rang out, signifying the round was over. The man in front of her excused himself and sidled off to the next table. Tessa forcefully crossed his name off her list, glaring daggers while Rachel flashed her a grin that promised, "I'll buy you ice cream after this." But Tessa's glowering was interrupted by the only thing that could have made her night worse: him. She'd first laid eyes on Nathan Munch at Rachel's inaugural speed dating night. Rachel had been so excited to organize it, and Tessa had happily agreed to attend in support of her best friend. Rachel had met her own husband while speed dating, so who knew? Maybe Rachel's luck would rub off on her. After half an evening of lackluster 5-minute dates, that hope had all but deflated until Nathan Munch sat down in front of her, breaking through the haze of romantic mediocrity with a brilliantly handsome smile. And then he opened his mouth. "So, Nathan, what brings you to speed dating?" Tessa had asked, after they'd traded introductions. "Honestly, my sister signed me up. What about you?" "My best friend organized the event." Tessa gestured toward Rachel, who was busy resetting the timer. "She thought it would be beneficial for me to expand my social circle." "Beneficial?" Nathan repeated, grinning. "I love that. Very, diplomatic. Most people would just say, 'My friend thinks I'm hopeless at dating.'" Tessa felt heat creep up her neck. "Well, I wouldn't put it like that." "Fair enough. So, what do you do when you're not diplomatically expanding your social circle?" "I'm an actuary at Brennan Mutual." She straightened slightly. After all, it was an impressive title at a respected firm. "I analyze statistical data to assess risk and uncertainty for insurance policies." Cool. Nathan nodded, like she'd told him she collected bottle caps. "That sounds like a lot of math." "There is considerable mathematic modeling, yes. Probability calculations, mortality tables, financial projections." She trailed off as his expression grew more amused, leaving her flustered. "Well, what do you do?" she asked pointedly. He leaned forward slightly. "I'm working on a graphic novel right now. Well, when I say working on it, I mean I have about 30 pages of sketches and the world's most detailed backstory for a character who doesn't actually appear until chapter 14. "That's an interesting project. Do you do that full time?" Nah, I teach kids art classes at the community center to pay rent. The comic thing is just for fun. But I'm sure it's not as fun as spending all day doing math. There was something in his tone. Was he mocking her? Tessa's smile became razor sharp. Well, I'm glad you get to spend your days doing something easy. Nathan's eyebrows shot up, and for a moment, his easy smile faltered. Then it was back, though it seemed a little more forced now. Exactly, Nathan said, leaning in and resting his elbows on the table. Most people don't get that. They're so focused on climbing corporate ladders and planning every little thing that they suck all the joy out of life. But I'm sure you're not like that. Well, I would argue a little planning and preparation tend to yield better results than just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. His eyes narrowed, and Nathan looked on the verge of saying something when Rachel rang the bell. Tessa blew out a sharp breath as he left, and stiffly circled the not interested option next to his name on her sheet, grateful she'd never have to see him again. But 2 months later, when Rachel had implored Tessa to fill in one of the open spots at her speed dating event, Tessa once again found herself face to face with Nathan Munch. Their second 5-minute date had gone as dismally as the first, as did the next date and the one after that. And here Nathan was, sitting in front of her for the 5th time, with his stupid man bun and his stupid 5 o'clock shadow and his stupidly handsome face. It was going to be a long evening indeed. 3 months later, Tessa was having a dreadful day. Her mother had decided to prematurely start the annual holiday guilt tripping over Tessa's perpetually single status in October. Worse, her mother's lecture was precipitated by the rumor that Julian Barrow, Tessa's ex, was recently seen house hunting in the Fairview neighborhood with his new girlfriend. Tessa's mother, Ann Smith, realtor extraordinaire, had it on good authority that Julian was in the market for a home of no less than $800,000 and an engagement ring of no less than $15,000, facing down another holiday season as the only single person in her family. Tessa did the unthinkable. She called up Rachel and asked to join the next speed dating night. Chapter 2. Thou shalt not lose bets to thy annoying sister. Nathan reminded himself of his 11th commandment as he ambled into the event room of the Thirsty Badger. This was the 10th time he'd forced himself into the trendy gastropub, a monthly ritual that started in January after Gigi bought him a ticket to a speed dating event as a gag Christmas gift. Gigi had joked he wouldn't last the first 5 minutes, and Nathan had foolishly boasted he could make it through a whole year of speed dating if needed. It had turned into a bet, witnessed by the entirety of the Munch family, and now he was stuck. The first few months, Nathan figured he'd make the best out of the situation. There were a handful of follow-up dates from the connections he'd made, but they all fizzled out within a few weeks. He was bracing himself for an hour and a half of mind-numbing small talk when he saw her, the indomitable Tessa Smith. While she didn't come to speed dating as religiously as he did, Nathan had to admit, whenever he spotted Tessa across the room, the evening was automatically more entertaining. Not because he harbored any romantic delusions. That ship had sailed, crashed, and sunk spectacularly back in January. He still cringed, thinking about their first encounter. She'd looked so miserable sitting there, clearly having a terrible time, and he thought he could lighten the mood with a few jokes. Instead, she'd taken everything wrong, made some cutting remarks about his life choices, and he'd stupidly fired back. By the time the bell rang, they'd established a mutual disdain that had only solidified over subsequent encounters. Nathan had tried to reset things the second time they'd met, but somehow they ended up in that same pattern. Polite introductions followed by increasingly barbed exchanges. After that, he decided to just lean into it. If Tessa wanted to trade witty insults, he was game. He'd even started looking forward to their 5-minute debates, treating them like friendly sparring matches, though he suspected she found their banter considerably less amusing. But tonight, when Nathan made his way over to her table, something felt different. Tessa's usual razor-sharp posture seemed more deflated than defensive, and there was a wariness in her expression he'd never seen before. "Well, well," he said, settling into the chair across from her with his trademark grin. "Ready for another riveting discussion about my questionable life choices?" She looked up at him, and for a moment, he thought he saw a flash of vulnerability across her face before her usual composure clicked back into place. "Actually, Nathan," she said, her voice lacking its usual cutting edge, "I have a proposition for you." That was new. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I'm intrigued," he said. Tessa glanced around the room, then leaned forward slightly. "How do you feel about being single during the holidays?" "Is this a trick question?" "I'm being serious." She folded her hands on the table. "I don't know about you, but for me, it's awful. I'm sick of the constant pitying looks and unsolicited advice to put myself out there now that I'm pushing 30. Well, as someone who crossed that bridge last year, I can confirm it only gets worse on the other side." At her frown, Nathan's teasing expression softened. "But I hear you, Tessa. The holidays can be rough when you're flying solo." "Speed dating clearly isn't working for either of us," Tessa continued, her words coming faster now, as if she was afraid she'd lose her nerve. "We've been coming to these things for months, and here we are, still single." "True," Nathan said slowly, not sure where she was headed. "What if we make a pact? We go on 3 dates before Thanksgiving, and then we could tell our families we're seeing someone during the holidays." Of all the things he'd expected to come out of Tessa Smith's mouth tonight, a dating proposal was not on Nathan's list. He stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. The desperate edge underneath her composed exterior suggested she was. Why go to all the trouble of fake dating when you can just tell your family you're seeing someone? "Because I don't want to lie to them. If we go on a few dates, then we'll be technically telling them the truth," she answered. "So, let me get this straight. Of all the people to pick from this gig, you're choosing me, the guy you argue with every time you see?" he said, unable to keep the amusement out of his voice. A flush crept up her neck. "Well, most of my other options here are creepy, boring, or geriatric. You may be annoying, but at least you're safe. But if you're not interested, I can just as easily find someone else. You don't have to be a jerk about it." "Didn't say I wasn't interested, Tess." "It's Tessa," she said through ground teeth. Nathan leaned back in his chair, considering. "Okay, but I see 2 problems with your plan, Tessa. First, you're putting a lot of faith in my ability to plan a decent date." "I've already thought about that. I'll plan the first date, you plan the second, and we'll flip a coin for the third. Problem solved." Nathan noticed that she had once again cut him off. and couldn't decide if it was because she was nervous or annoyed. Her thumb was tapping a frantic beat against the table. Had she always done that? Fair enough. But second, if we're only dating until Thanksgiving, that just gets us halfway through the holidays. What about Christmas? December's busy. We'll be too swamped to see each other, and then I'll officially break things off in January. You've really thought this through, haven't you? I'm an actuary, Nathan. I think everything through. Nathan studied her face. Anxiety veiled beneath her careful composure. Against his better judgment, he found himself genuinely intrigued. 10 months ago, when she'd first sat down across from him, he would have jumped at the chance to take her out. She was beautiful, sharp-witted, and despite their constant bickering, there was an undeniable spark between them. At the very least, a date with Tessa Smith wouldn't be boring, and if it meant spending the holidays without his family's lectures about his commitment issues, all the better. Besides, it wasn't that he couldn't commit. He just refused to settle for someone he knew was wrong for him. A bell rang, cutting off his thoughts and signaling the dating round was over. All pretense of composure vanished from Tessa's face, her green eyes widening in a silent plea. You know what? He said, extending his hand across the table. You've got yourself a deal. Chapter 3. Tessa glared at herself in the mirror. Here she was, changing outfits like some rom-com protagonist. Pathetic. This outfit was fine. She didn't need to put anything else on. She eyed her dresser with frustration before trying on a 5th sweater. She finally settled on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a cream cable-knit sweater that said, effortlessly casual. No need for Nathan to know the effort had taken 45 minutes. Half an hour later, she stood in the pumpkin patch parking lot, 15 minutes early, with plenty of time to second-guess every life decision that had led to this moment. What had she been thinking, proposing this ridiculous scheme? And why had she volunteered to plan the first date? She should have made Nathan go first. Let him set the tone and then figure out what they were doing from there. Hey, Tess. Tessa spun around to find Nathan approaching. His dark hair hung loose instead of in his usual dopey man bun. It's Tessa, she huffed, her voice coming out higher than intended. Course, Tessa. He glanced around at the sprawling field of pumpkins. This is cute. Very, fall aesthetic. Tessa bristled. She'd spent 2 hours researching romantic autumn activities like some desperate Hallmark movie character, and apparently it showed in the worst way. I thought it would be nice, but if you're just going to make fun of my date idea... Whoa, easy. Nathan held up his hands in mock surrender. I said it was cute. That's a compliment. I like corn mazes, I like cider, I like... He gestured vaguely at the scenery. All of this. Oh, Tessa felt herself blush. Right, good. An awkward silence settled between them, broken only by the distant laughter of children and the crunch of leaves underfoot. So, Nathan said finally, rocking back on his heels. Do we have a game plan here, or are we just winging it? I thought we'd start with the corn maze. Tessa pointed toward the entrance. They have this trivia challenge thing, and then we can explore after. Sounds perfect. Lead the way, boss. He gently teased, and she felt another flare of irritation. She quashed it down, reminding herself to relax. This wouldn't go well if she got defensive. Turning on her heel, she marched them toward the entrance of the maze. A bored-looking teenager handed them a laminated sheet of paper and explained the rules. Pick your category: sports, art, math and science, or pop culture. When you hit the numbered signs, answer the question. Each answer corresponds to a path. Only the right answer takes you the correct way. Tessa studied the categories. How about math and science? Yeah, that's gonna be a hard pass for me, Tess, Nathan said, scanning the pop culture questions. How about this one? But I'm good at math and science. We won't get lost. I'm sure you are, but this is a date, not a professional development seminar. He grinned at her. Live a little. What's the fun of a maze if you don't get a bit turned around? She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Fine. Pop culture it is. They stepped into the maze, the tall corn stalks closing around them and muffling the sounds of the outside world. They walked for several minutes as the path twisted and turned before opening up to a fork with 3 options. A wooden sign marked with a 1 stood in the center. Okay, question 1. Tessa held up the sheet, squinting at the small print. In the office, what is the name of the company that buys Dunder Mifflin? Go left if you think the answer is Prince Family Paper, straight if it's Vance Refrigeration, or right for Sabre. Well, it's obviously not Vance Refrigeration. Let's go with Prince Family Paper. I think that's the most logical option. She started to walk down the left path. You joking? Nathan called. Tessa turned. It's the most logical option. It's also the wrong option, Nathan said with a grin, as he continued to stand in front of the numbered sign. She paused, eyeing him skeptically as he continued. Come on, don't you remember that song where they thought saber was pronounced sabre? I never actually watched it. I'm sorry, what? Nathan gaped at her. Why is it that every millennial is supposed to like The Office? I couldn't even get through the first episode. Tessa huffed, walking past him and down the right path. Sure, season 1 isn't the best, but that's true of plenty of shows. I mean, Parks and Rec didn't really get going until season 2 either. She looked at him blankly. No, Tess, come on. You haven't seen Parks and Rec either? It came out when I was in college. I was too busy with school. She didn't mention that Julian, whom she'd been dating at the time, had thought the show was dumb. College had been Tessa's chance to reinvent herself, finally shedding the weird math kid label that had followed her through middle and high school. When she'd started dating the popular and ever-charming Julian Barrow, Tessa learned what was cool and what wasn't. Parks and Rec, apparently, hadn't made the cut. Well, unlike you, us art school kids somehow found time to binge entire sitcoms between finger painting lessons, Nathan said, his tone teasing. Tessa glanced at him with interest. You went to art school? Got my MFA from SCAD, actually. Thought I'd end up working at a gallery, curating exhibits. Maybe do some consulting work. What happened? Nathan shrugged. Needed to pay rent while I was job hunting, so I took a temporary position at the community center, teaching kids classes. He smiled. Turns out I loved it. There's something about working with kids. They're so fearless, you know? They'll just try things without overthinking it. And when you see a shy kid finally share their work, it just makes the gig all the more worth it. He let out a self-conscious chuckle. Sorry, I get kind of preachy about it. No, that sounds really fulfilling, Tessa assured him. At the next fork in the pathway with a numbered signpost, they consulted their trivia sheet again. Nathan tossed out overconfident guesses as she argued his logic, but they seemed to stumble onto the correct path more often than not. The pair fell into easy conversation as they wandered through the tall rows of corn, interrupted by the occasional shrieks of excited children chasing one another down the pathways. After many twists and turns, they managed to exit the maze. Tessa fanned herself, regretting her choice of sweater after 45 minutes of walking in the unseasonably warm weather. She was grateful when Nathan recommended they get cider next. He ordered 2 cups of fresh pressed apple cider and a bag of donuts. They settled at a free table near a wooden fence overlooking the pumpkin patch. Tessa savored the crisp drink, sneaking glances at Nathan as he watched a line of people waiting for the next hay bale ride. She realized her earlier nerves had completely dissipated. She was more surprised to admit that she was actually having fun, which was strange, considering this was Nathan Munch, the man she'd spent months verbally sparring with at speed dating events. "This is nice," Nathan said after a moment, his tone lacking its usual teasing edge. "Good call on the location." He turned and gave her a mischievous smile as he playfully added, "It'll be good material for nosy questions from our families. Speaking of which," Nathan pulled out his phone, "we should probably document this. Knowing my sister, she'll demand photographic evidence before she believes I'm actually seeing someone." "Oh, yes, that makes sense." Nathan moved close enough that Tessa could smell his woodsy cologne. He held up his phone, angling it to capture both of them with the pumpkin field in the background. "Smile like you're having the time of your life," he said, grinning at the camera. I don't think," Tessa began, but Nathan snapped the photo, then glanced at the screen. "Oh, that's terrible. You look like you're being held hostage. Let's try again." This time Nathan slipped his arm around her shoulders, casual and warm, pulling her slightly closer. Tessa stiffened for a moment before forcing herself to relax into it. His arm was solid against her back. "Now smile for real this time. Think about how smug you'll feel when your mom sees this." That did it. Tessa smiled as laughter threatened to bubble out of her. Nathan snapped several photos in quick succession. "Perfect," he said, but he didn't immediately pull away. Instead, he showed her the phone, his arm still draped around her shoulders. "See? We look like an actual couple." They did. In the photo, Nathan grinned broadly, and Tessa was reminded, annoyingly, of how objectively attractive he was. Nathan pulled his arm back, tucking his phone away. "Well, Tess, those pumpkins aren't going to pick themselves." It's Tessa. She was starting to understand why Nathan was still single. Objectively handsome and objectively annoying. Chapter 4. Nathan shouldered his way through the entrance of the old ironworks warehouse, careful not to jostle the cardboard box cradled in his arms. The Lancaster night market was in full swing, the converted warehouse thrumming with energy. String lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a warm glow over the maze of vendor booths below. The air was thick with competing scents: fresh pretzels, leather, incense, and something deep-fried that made his stomach growl. He navigated the crowded aisles with practiced ease, nodding at familiar faces as he passed. The night market had become a second home of sorts over the past year. Between teaching kids classes at the community center and trying to scrape together enough to chip away at his student loans, selling his pottery here had become a lifeline he hadn't expected to need. "Nathan!" called a voice from up ahead. Maya Chen stood behind her booth, arms crossed but grinning. Her space was a riot of color: hand-dyed scarves and screen-printed tote bags displaying bold, geometric designs hung from hooks. But there was a conspicuous empty space on one shelf. "1 box of mugs, as promised." "You're a lifesaver," she said as Nathan approached. "Still can't believe I forgot the box with your ceramics on my kitchen counter."
"Lucky for you, I didn't have plans tonight."
Maya started unpacking the mugs, examining each one with an artist's critical eye. "Oh, these are gorgeous, by the way. Love the glaze on this one." "Thanks. Tried a new technique with the cobalt." She was already arranging them on her display shelf, spacing them just so. "These'll sell out by the end of the night. I'm calling it now. Your stuff always moves fast." Nathan felt a rush of pride, even as he tried to play it cool. "Well, if you're that confident, maybe you could front me the money now and save me a trip back next week." "Huh, nice try," Maya laughed, shooing him away from her booth. "Now get out of here. You're blocking my customers." Nathan stepped back into the flow of foot traffic, letting himself be carried along by the current of market-goers. He wasn't in any hurry to get home. His apartment would be empty. Jasper, his roommate, was visiting family for the weekend, and the thought of spending Saturday night alone watching Netflix felt depressing. At least here he could people watch, maybe grab some food from one of the carts outside. He'd just stopped to examine a display of hand-forged knives when he spotted her. Tessa stood near the entrance, phone pressed to her ear, her expression cycling through confusion, disappointment, and then resignation in quick succession. Even from a distance, Nathan could read the tension in her posture. He watched as she ended the call and stood there for a moment, looking lost in the middle of the crowded warehouse. Then she turned toward the exit. "Tess," he called out, weaving through the crowd toward her. She turned, surprise flashing across her face. "Nathan? What are you doing here?" "Could ask you the same thing," he grinned, coming to a stop in front of her. "Though based on your expression, I'm guessing your evening didn't go as planned." Tessa's jaw tightened. "My friend Rachel was supposed to meet me here, but she just called. Her son came down with a fever, so she had to cancel." "That sucks." "It's fine," she said, but her voice was tight. "I was just heading out." "What, already?" Nathan gestured at the warehouse around them. "You just got here. Have you even seen any of the market yet?" "Not really, but—" "Then stay. Hang out with me for a bit." The words came out before he'd fully thought them through, but once they were out there, Nathan found he meant them. "Come on, it'll be fun. I can give you the grand tour." Tessa hesitated, and Nathan could practically see her cycling through reasons to decline. "I don't want to impose on your plans." "What plans? I've got nothing but time." He smiled at her. "Besides, the night market is way better with company, so really you'd be doing me a favor." She studied him for a long moment, and Nathan wondered what she saw. Finally, her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Okay, sure. Why not?" "Excellent choice." Nathan turned, surveying the sea of booths around them. "Fair warning, though, I take my night market tour guide duties very seriously. There will be multiple stops, possibly some impulse purchases, and definitely food." That earned him a small smile. "I think I can handle that." They started walking, Nathan leading them through the maze of vendors. He pointed out his favorite booths, including a guy who printed vintage-style posters of Lancaster County landmarks, and a couple who sold the most amazing lavender honey he'd ever tasted. "Do you come here a lot?" Tessa asked, as they paused at a booth selling hand-bound journals. "Pretty regularly, yeah. It's a good place to network, see what other artists are doing." He picked up one of the journals, admiring the leatherwork. "Plus, it's nice to be around creative people, you know? The community center's great, don't get me wrong, but it's mostly kids and their stressed-out parents." Tessa nodded, running her fingers along the spine of a journal. "Rachel's the one who told me about this place, actually. She comes here sometimes with her husband for date nights." Nathan heard something wistful in her tone. "That's nice that they do that." "Yeah," Tessa said, setting the journal down carefully. "They're really good together. You know, they met speed dating, of all things. It's what inspired Rachel to start running events at the Thirsty Badger. Thought maybe she could help other people find what she did." Seems like it hasn't quite worked out that way for most of us, Nathan said with a wry smile. Well, Rachel knows of at least 4 couples who got into relationships after meeting at one of her events, Tessa said, and then she laughed. No, I suppose it's 5 if you count fake relationships. Nathan grinned back at her. They continued through the market, their conversation flowing more easily than it had even during their date at the pumpkin patch. Tessa had opinions about everything from artisanal hot sauces to handmade candles. Nathan found himself genuinely enjoying her running commentary. At a booth selling vintage clothing, Tessa held up a sequined jacket with exaggerated shoulder pads. Be honest, could I pull this off? Nathan tilted his head, considering. I mean, you could. Question is, where would you wear it? My next actuarial conference. She struck a pose, and Nathan couldn't help but laugh. Now that I would pay to see. They'd probably think I was having some kind of breakdown. Tessa hung the jacket back up, but she was smiling. They made their way toward the back of the warehouse, where the crowd thinned out near the exit to the courtyard. Nathan could see the glow of string lights and smell the competing aromas from the food carts. Food? He suggested. Definitely food. The courtyard was quieter, with scattered picnic tables and heat lamps fighting off the autumn chill. They surveyed their options: Korean tacos, wood-fired pizza, Thai noodles, gourmet grilled cheese, before settling on different carts and agreeing to meet at a table near the far corner. Nathan returned with pad thai and found Tessa already seated, unwrapping what looked like a banh mi. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the sound of the market drifting out from the warehouse behind them. I'm glad I stayed, she said suddenly, looking up at him. This is nice. Told you, night market's best enjoyed with friends. Tessa raised an eyebrow. So if it's best enjoyed with friends, why were you here alone? 'Cause I wasn't here to enjoy it, Nathan explained. I was dropping off some merchandise. That booth back there with all the scarves and bags, my friend Maya sells some of my pottery there on commission. Really? I didn't know you sold your work. Well, actually, I didn't even know you did pottery. Nathan shrugged, twirling noodles around his fork. Yeah, I like to paint as well, but selling pottery is a bit easier. I've got a few different outlets. Maya's booth, a couple of gift shops in town. Sometimes I do craft fairs on weekends. I love working at the community center, but it's not exactly lucrative. And believe it or not, art school costs a pretty penny. Her eyes widened. I didn't realize. Yeah, I'll be paying off those loans until I'm 50, he said with a grim nod. So I do a lot of side gigs, pottery sales, the occasional freelance work, whatever I can pick up. Tessa was quiet for a moment, and Nathan wondered if he'd overshared, but when he looked up, she was watching him with something that looked like respect. That's really impressive, actually, building multiple income streams like that. Is it? I kind of feel like I'm just scrambling. No, I mean it. A lot of people talk about pursuing their passion, but they don't think about the practical side. You've found a way to make art work for you. Nathan felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the pad thai. Thanks, Tessa. That means a lot, actually. They finished their food, chatting about her job, which was apparently more interesting than he'd given it credit for. Eventually, the cold drove them back inside for one final loop through the warehouse. The crowd had thinned somewhat, the earlier frenzy mellowing into a more relaxed browsing pace. As they neared the entrance, Tessa turned to him. Thanks for this, Nathan. Really, it was a fun second date. Nathan stopped walking. Hold on, this doesn't count as a date. What? Why not? Because I didn't plan it. You said you'd plan the first date, I'd plan the second, and we'd flip a coin for the third. He grinned at her confused expression. Hey, those were the terms of your agreement, Tessa.
I'm not letting you weasel out of another date just because we happen to run into each other.
She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. A smile tugged at her lips. You're really going to hold me to the exact terms? She rolled her eyes at his smug nod. Fine. But she was fully smiling now. He watched her walk away, hands shoved in her pockets against the cold, and found himself smiling. 3 dates had seemed like such a small, manageable number when she'd first proposed this scheme. But standing there in the glow of the night market, Nathan was starting to think 3 might not be nearly enough. Chapter 5. Tessa stared at the text message on her phone.
Game night at my place Friday? Come meet my friends so they stop asking if you're real.
She typed back. Does this count as one of our 3 dates? Nathan's reply came almost immediately.
Nah, but if I charm you into keeping me around past Thanksgiving, at least you'll already know my people. It'll be fun. You in?
He wasn't getting off the hook that easy. Her fingers flew across the phone as she typed. Per the terms of our pact, our second date is an event you plan. This is you planning an event, is it not? By definition, it's a date. In response, he simply texted her a screenshot of the Merriam-Webster definition of a date that read, a social engagement between 2 persons that often has a romantic character. He'd highlighted 2 persons. Tessa rolled her eyes at the technicality, but found herself typing, what time? Which was how she ended up outside Nathan's apartment on a Friday night, clutching a wine bottle like a security blanket. She'd spent 20 minutes in the wine aisle trying to pick something that said, I'm definitely a real girlfriend and not a fraud. This was fine, perfectly normal, just meeting the friends of the man she was fake dating because her ex-boyfriend's house hunting escapade had triggered a spiral of poor decisions. Tessa knocked on the door before the absurdity of it all could sink in any further. Nathan answered on the second knock, his face lighting up when he saw her. The apartment was smaller than she'd expected, but tidy. Artwork covered the walls, framed prints along with some sketches pinned up casually.
Everyone, this is Tessa,
Nathan announced as they entered the living room. 4 faces turned toward her with varying degrees of curiosity and welcome.
Hey, I'm Benny,
said a man with warm brown skin and an immediately friendly smile, rising from the couch to shake her hand.
Nathan's mentioned you exactly 0 times, so we're all pretty intrigued.
That's because I knew you'd be weird about it, Nathan said. Well, we're perfectly normal, said the woman sprawled across an armchair, her blonde hair in a messy bun. I'm Eve, and that's my boyfriend Cord. She gestured toward a tall man looking through a stack of board games on the coffee table.
And the one currently losing at Uno against himself is my roommate Jasper,
Nathan added. Jasper, who had cropped dark hair and was indeed playing what appeared to be a solo game of Uno, gave her a distracted wave.
In my defense, all 4 of my hands have terrible cards. And now you've met the whole crew,
Nathan said, guiding Tessa toward the couch.
Want something to drink?
2 hours later, they'd played 3 different games, none of which Tessa had won, but she found herself having a good time anyway. Benny kept everyone entertained with increasingly elaborate explanations for why he was losing. Eve had a wickedly dry sense of humor, while seemingly mild-mannered Cord delivered devastating one-liners that left everyone wheezing with laughter. And Jasper had somehow convinced everyone to play around where they could only communicate in rhyme, which had devolved into chaos within minutes. Nathan, for his part, seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He traded easy banter with his friends, topped off drinks without being asked, and occasionally caught her eye from across the room with a small smile that made her stomach do an unexpected flip. Okay, Eve said, dealing cards for their fourth game. But can we get back to talking about what Nathan's actually doing this Sunday? Because I have thoughts.
Oh, no,
Nathan said. Tessa raised an eyebrow. What's Nathan doing?
Going to the Renaissance Fair,
Cord answered.
I'm helping with the pottery demonstration,
Nathan protested.
Yeah, but afterwards you're gonna wander around alone like some sad medieval peasant. You know what's not sad? All of us going. We'll learn about some medieval pottery and then stuff our faces with turkey legs while we watch the joust,
Benny said.
I'm in,
Jasper said immediately.
I could bring a lute. You don't play the lute,
Cord pointed out.
This is a terrible idea,
Nathan said, but he was grinning. Eve turned toward Tessa with bright enthusiasm. You should come too. You free Sunday afternoon? Oh, I actually can't Sunday. I have a coworker's bridal shower, Tessa said, relief washing over her at the legitimate excuse.
Well then,
Benny said, sitting up straighter with sudden inspiration.
Nathan, you should just take Tessa to the fair on Saturday instead, like an actual date.
Nathan paused.
I mean, it's up to Tessa if she'd want to do that.
Tessa felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, waiting for her answer. A Renaissance fair, surrounded by strangers in costumes who probably expected her to participate in ridiculous activities, sounded like her own personal nightmare. The reasonable part of her brain told her to decline, but another part, the one that still remembered being the lonely kid watching other children play from the sidelines, couldn't bear the thought of marking herself as the outsider again.
Well, Tess,
Nathan said, something careful in his tone.
What do you say?
She heard herself answer before she could stop. Sure, sounds fun. The group erupted in cheers. Eve immediately started pulling up costume ideas on her phone, while Jasper launched into an impassioned speech about period-accurate footwear. And Tessa sat there, smile fixed in place, wondering what she'd just agreed to. She was still pondering her predicament as Nathan walked her to her car after the final game.
Thanks for coming tonight, he said. My friends really like you.
That's great, Tessa said, and meant it.
So, Renaissance Fair, huh?
He glanced at her sideways.
Gotta be honest, I'm surprised you said yes. Doesn't really seem like your scene.
What, you think I can't enjoy historical costumes?
I distinctly remember you telling me during one of our speed dates that you don't even like themed parties. So no, I don't think you'd like all the Ren Fair costumes.
Darn. She had said that, hadn't she? Nathan leaned against her car, studying her face in the glow of the street light.
Why didn't you just say it wasn't your thing? No one would have cared.
I didn't want to be difficult.
Difficult?
He laughed, but not unkindly.
Tessa, you've argued with me about literally everything since we've met. That's not an insult, by the way. Why go along with something you clearly don't want to do now?
Tessa clenched her teeth. What, you think I'm just argumentative about everything?
No,
Nathan said simply.
But you've never had a problem standing your ground with me, so it seemed weird that you just folded in there.
Well, it's different with you. I knew I wasn't going to have to waste my time trying to impress you within about 3 minutes of knowing you.
Ouch,
he said with a grin. But with your friends, she trailed off, not sure how to explain without sounding pathetic. She looked down at her keys, thumb rubbing against the metal edge.
You wanted them to like you,
Nathan finished, quietly. Yeah, I guess I wanted to fit in, Tessa said, then immediately wished she hadn't, It sounded so desperate. I know it's stupid. I'm almost 30. I shouldn't still be. Ugh. She cut herself off with a frustrated gesture. Nathan was quiet for a moment. It's not stupid. It is, though. I spent all of college doing this exact thing. Going along with whatever my boyfriend or his friends wanted to do, pretending to like things I didn't, never speaking up because I didn't want to be the weird one. The words were all tumbling out now, and she couldn't seem to stop them. It's just, I thought I was over all that. And tonight felt like all that again. Tessa nodded, not trusting her voice. For what it's worth, Nathan said after a moment, I don't think you need to worry about fitting in with my friends. They already liked you, the real you, not whatever version you think you need to be for them. How would you know? You barely know the real me. The question came out sharper than she intended. Look, I'm not saying you need to stop caring about what people think or anything. That's probably not realistic, but you didn't care what I thought about you when we first met, and what I've learned so far about you, I like. I like that you don't laugh at my jokes when you don't think they're funny just to be polite. And I like that you're honest enough to tell me my graphic novel idea sounds pretentious, even if you're categorically wrong about that. That earned him a chuckle from her. So, Nathan said, pushing off from her car, our Ren Fair date. Is it really a yes, or is it a no? Tessa let out a breath. It's gonna be a no for me? Good, because I didn't want to go twice. Nathan answered with a smile. What? You're not a fan of the fair? Tessa snorted. He shook his head. Honestly, not really, but they're paying me decently to man the pottery tent for half a day since their normal potter has a conflict. Tessa nodded. She turned to climb into her car, then paused. Nathan? Yeah? Thanks for calling me out about the fair. I would have gone and been miserable. He grinned. Well, what are fake boyfriends for? Then his expression shifted, becoming more thoughtful. And don't worry, I'll think of something more low-key for our official second date. She shook her head, but found herself smiling anyway. As she arrived home, Tessa realized she was still smiling, and more surprisingly, she was actually looking forward to their date. Chapter 6. Nathan was digging through his sister's kitchen cabinets, hunting for her extra pie tins, when Gigi appeared in the doorway, watching him with amused suspicion. What are you doing here? Borrowing those pie tins I asked for. I only have one and I need at least 3. Nathan emerged victorious with 2 glass dishes. You agreed to let me use them, remember? Yeah, but you could have just waited until tomorrow when I offered to drop them off. Gigi moved into the living room, a smile tugging at her lips. And where's the fun in that, Georgiana? Nathan said, deliberately using her full name. She narrowed her eyes, pointing a warning finger at him. Don't make me regret giving you that spare key. Ah, Gigi, I've made you upset. You better get used to that feeling because I'm winning the family pie contest this year. She rolled her eyes. You say that every year. And this year I mean it. I've got 3 solid recipes I'm testing out. Gigi took a sip of water, studying him with new interest. That sounds like a lot of cooking to do solo. Without thinking, Nathan answered. Well, Tessa's helping me. Gigi's eyebrows shot up. Who's Tessa? Nathan inwardly groaned. He hadn't meant to share about her yet, but she'd been on his mind so frequently lately that her name had just popped out. No one, forget I said it. Nathan Munch, do you have a girlfriend? Gigi squealed. No. He grimaced as the word came out like a petulant teenager. You're blushing. Oh my gosh, you're actually blushing. Gigi hopped on the counter, gleefully swinging her legs. Nathan rolled his eyes. There was no getting out of telling Gigi. She was like a bloodhound when she sensed gossip. So when did you meet this Tessa, and why haven't you mentioned her before?
A bit ago,
Nathan said, trying for casual and failing.
And before you get all excited, we're just seeing where things go. It's not that big a deal.
Well, it is to me. When have you ever voluntarily told me about a girl you're dating? I usually just hear about it all after you break up, if that. And not only are you blushing like some dainty damsel, but you're letting this woman help you bake your Christmas competition pie? If that's not serious, I don't know what is.
She's only helping with the practice pie,
he corrected. But Gigi didn't seem to hear him. Tell me what she's like, she demanded. Nathan shook his head. She frowned at him, before her eyes took on a sly glint. You know, I'm supposed to have coffee with Mom tomorrow. I wonder what she'd think of your dating escapades. Nathan had envisioned this whole Tessa situation going down much differently. If things had gone according to plan, he would have had time to craft how he wanted to talk about Tessa. Now he was backed into a corner.
All right, I'll tell you about her. Just don't go blabbing to Mom. She's from around here, went to some Ivy League school, and is an actuary.
Gigi crossed her arms, her brow arched. You're gonna have to do better than that, or these lips are blabbing to Mom. Nathan let out a breath.
Fine. She challenges me. Like, she doesn't just go along with whatever I say. She calls me out when I'm being ridiculous, and she's brilliant. You know, she gets this little line between her eyebrows when she's concentrating on something, and she's just...
He trailed off, realization seeping into him. Somewhere between arguing over pop culture trivia in a corn maze and watching her laugh with his friends at game night, this had stopped being just a convenient arrangement to get through the holidays. He liked Tessa. She was thoughtful, genuine, got endearingly excited about risk assessment models. He thought of her green eyes looking up at him when she'd opened up about her insecurities after game night. For the first time, he admitted that this could truly go somewhere beyond 3 dates and a pre-planned breakup if he and Tessa would only let it. Gigi studied him for a long moment before her teasing expression softened into a more knowing one. You really like her. Reality snapped back around Nathan.
Whatever, Gigi,
Nathan said, but he was smiling. On his walk back home, Nathan called Tessa. I was wondering when you'd get around to contacting me, she said. He could tell she was smiling from the sound of her voice. So, you gonna tell me what you've got planned for our official second date? Nathan grinned into the phone.
Got something great lined up. Hope you're ready for the best pie you've ever tasted.
Well, lucky for you, I love pie. Where are we gonna go?
My place. I'm making it. Well, technically, we're making it.
She snorted into the phone. You're baking a pie? You?
Don't sound so shocked. I have many hidden talents.
Such as?
You'll have to show up to find out.
There was a pause before Tessa continued. Wait, I thought your definition of a date specified 2 people. If Jasper's going to be there, this isn't a date.
Jasper's working late, but I'm sure he'll be happy to cast his vote on which pie tastes better after the fact.
So it's just us baking pies? She said slowly, her voice tentative.
I'll throw in dinner too. Homemade.
Another pause. But when she spoke next, the teasing tone was back. You're going to cook and bake? Should I bring a fire extinguisher?
Your confidence is truly inspiring. See you at 6?
Fine, but if you poison me, I'm haunting you.
Noted. See you tomorrow, Tess.
He hung up with a grin before she could correct him. Nathan checked the slow cooker one more time, then glanced at the clock. 5:53. The chuck roast had been cooking for hours, filling his apartment with the rich scent of beef, herbs, and red wine. The vegetables were tender, the potatoes perfectly soft, and the table was set. He'd just finished arranging the pie ingredients on the counter when there was a knock at the door. Tessa stood in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine. "Right on time," Nathan said. Stepping aside, he led her into the kitchen, where the slow cooker sat on the counter, next to carefully measured ingredients for 3 different pie recipes. "Dinner's basically ready if you're hungry." Tessa paused, taking in the scene. "You actually cooked." Why does everyone sound so surprised by this? Nathan grabbed 2 wine glasses from the cabinet. "I'm a functional adult and I can operate a slow cooker. Behold, red wine braised chuck roast with carrots and potatoes." Tessa leaned in, breathing in the fragrant steam. "Okay, I'm impressed. That smells amazing." "Save the praise for after you've tasted it," Nathan joked, but he was grinning as he ladled generous portions onto 2 plates. "Come on, let's eat first. Can't bake on an empty stomach." They settled at his small dining table, and for a few minutes there was just the sound of silverware on plates. "This is really good," Tessa said finally, looking up at him with genuine surprise. "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mom, mostly. She's big on family dinners." Nathan took a sip of wine. "When I moved out for college, she made me promise I'd learn to cook at least 5 things that weren't ramen. This was one of them." "That's more than I ever made in college," Tessa said as she speared a carrot on her fork and popped it in her mouth. "Too busy calculating risk assessments to cook?" "Too busy studying, actually. Actuary exams are no joke." She grimaced at the memory. "I took them right after college. 5 years of exams, 1 every 6 months or so, on top of working a demanding job. Didn't really leave a lot of time for developing life skills." Nathan studied her across the table. "Do you regret that?" Tessa was quiet for a moment, considering. "I mean, it paid off career-wise, but I don't know. Sometimes I wonder what I missed out on. I didn't travel like a lot of friends did. I didn't even really date much after college. I've just kind of been in my own little bubble." She shook her head as if trying to clear her thoughts. "Let's talk about something else. I'm no expert, but it seems like you've got a lot more ingredients than just 1 pie calls for." "That's because we're making 3. "What, is this some type of pie contest?" "Actually, yeah." Nathan leaned back in his chair, warming to the topic. "Every Thanksgiving, everyone in my family brings a pie and we have a little friendly competition. My Aunt Linda is the reigning champion, going on 6 years. But this year is my year. I can feel it." After dinner, Nathan talked Tessa through one of the recipes while he took on the other 2. They worked side by side at the counter, chatting easily as Tessa peeled and sliced apples while Nathan measured out ingredients. He started on his crusts, hands working through the familiar motions of cutting butter into flour until it resembled coarse sand. He glanced over at Tessa during a lull in the conversation. She'd created an impressive pile of apple peel ribbons, their green spirals coiling beside a large bowl of chopped fruit. She was studying the recipe card for her salted caramel apple pie. A small crease formed between her eyebrows as she concentrated. Her eyes caught his staring, and he quickly covered with teasing her about her overly precise peeling technique. As they continued to cook, Nathan moved between his 2 pie stations, a cranberry custard and a brown butter walnut. They talked about his family's Thanksgiving traditions as they worked, and he joked how his sister Gigi always made the same cherry pie, but somehow expected different results. Tessa shared her own stories about her mother's attempts at hosting, picture-perfect holidays. When all 3 pies were finally assembled and ready to slide into the oven, Nathan felt a rush of rightness at having Tessa here with him. He led her to the couch and pulled up Parks and Rec, arguing that they needed to do something educational for her while waiting for the pies to cook. He expected her to argue, but she merely laughed and settled onto the couch. Nathan sat beside her, feeling absurdly like a nervous teenager, overthinking where to put his arm. He settled for resting it on the back of the couch. He queued up the first episode of Season 2. Cold opens were usually his favorite part of the show, but as Leslie Knope rapped across the screen, he found himself distracted. Tessa was different. That sharpness that used to define their encounters, her cutting remarks and critiques, had mellowed into playful teasing that hinted at affection. She seemed relaxed, happy even, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. As the next episode queued up, he became acutely aware when Tessa shifted position, settling deeper into the cushions. The distance between them had shrunk. Her side was nearly touching him. His arm had been resting along the couch back, and when he slowly lowered it and made contact with her shoulders, she stiffened but didn't pull away. Maybe he had read too much into the softness of her voice that evening and the way she'd smiled at him in the kitchen. He was about to pull his arm back when she looked up at him, a question in her gaze. From this close, he could see that her green eyes held flecks of brown. He leaned in, imperceptibly closer, when the front door opened. Jasper sidled into the room. Something smells good. Nathan's arm dropped from Tessa's shoulders. We're baking pies. They should be about done, actually. Perfect timing, then. Jasper grinned, dropping his bag by the door. Good to see you, Tessa. They let the pies cool for several minutes as they stood around the kitchen, making small talk. Nathan kept catching Tessa's eye, and she'd look away with a small smile that made him wonder what would have happened if Jasper had come home 10 minutes later. Finally, Nathan declared the pies cool enough and cut into each one. The cranberry custard had set perfectly, the brown butter walnut smelled divine, and Tessa's salted caramel apple oozed with golden filling. They each tried all 3, and the verdict was immediate. You gotta go with the salted caramel, Jasper said around a mouthful. No contest. After a few more minutes of conversation, Tessa glanced at her phone and announced she should probably head home. Nathan wrapped the salted caramel pie carefully in foil, despite her protests. He walked her down to her car, the autumn night crisp around them. As they reached her car, Nathan pulled a quarter from his pocket. So, we still need to figure out our third date. Right, the coin flip. Tessa wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Heads I plan it, tails you do? Nathan nodded, then flipped the coin high into the air. It caught the streetlight as it spun before landing in his palm. He slapped it onto the back of his other hand. Tails, he announced, showing her. Looks like I'm planning date number 3. Any ideas? A few, he grinned at her. You'll just have to wait and see. Tessa rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. I'm starting to think you enjoy keeping me in suspense. Maybe a little. She moved toward her car door, and Nathan felt the moment slipping away. He wanted to close the distance between them, to pick up where they'd left off, but the moment felt wrong. The charged energy from their almost kiss had all but evaporated. Thanks for tonight, Tessa said, one hand on her car door. I had a really good time. She hesitated like she might say something else, but then just smiled and slid into the driver's seat. Nathan stepped back as she started the engine, raising his hand in a wave as she pulled away from the curb. He stood there in the cold, watching her taillights disappear around the corner, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. What if she'd been waiting for him to make a move? What if that look she'd given him on the couch had been an invitation and he'd missed his chance? He should have just kissed her. Nathan turned back toward his building, replaying the evening in his head. Whatever he came up with for date 3, he wasn't going to let another opportunity like that slip away. Chapter 7. Tessa lay in bed that night, staring at her ceiling and replaying the evening frame by frame. The way Nathan had slowly lowered his arm around her shoulders, that moment when he'd leaned in, his eyes dropping to her lips. Had he actually been about to kiss her? She squeezed her eyes shut. No. Knowing Nathan, he was probably just messing with her, getting close enough to make her flustered before cracking some joke about broccoli in her teeth. If Jasper hadn't walked in, Nathan surely would have gotten his laugh at her expense. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, making her jump. She grabbed it, half expecting to see a text from Nathan saying something stupid about pie or Parks and Rec. Her heart stuttered. Julian. She hadn't heard from Julian in over 3 years, not since that final awkward phone call where he wished her well and promised they'd stay in touch. They hadn't.
Tessa, long time no talk. Just moved back to the area, taking over as the lead banker for the new Fairview branch. Would love to catch up over coffee if you're free. How's Thursday?
Tessa read the message 3 times, her chest fluttering uncomfortably. Julian, here, wanting to see her. She thought of the handsome, confident man who'd swept into her life freshman year at Penn. Their 4 years together had felt like a fairy tale. He introduced her to his world of country club dinners and spring break trips to the Hamptons. She'd studied his friends, learned what they laughed at, what music they liked, what opinions were acceptable to voice. She'd molded herself into someone who could stand beside Julian Barrow without looking out of place. And then, 3 months after graduation, he'd ended it. He'd accepted a position at his uncle's investment bank in San Francisco. Long distance wouldn't work. They were so young. Surely she understood. Tessa had understood perfectly. She wasn't worth the inconvenience. Tessa had retreated into her actuarial exams, burying herself in probability tables and financial projections where everything made sense and nothing hurt. And now, Julian was back. Her fingers hovered over her phone. She should say no. She was seeing Nathan, well, sort of. Fake seeing him, at least. Except it hadn't felt fake tonight, had it? But that was just 3 dates. A temporary arrangement. Nathan knew the deal. This ended at Thanksgiving, and then they'd both move on with their lives. Before she could overthink it any further, Tessa typed back. Wow, congrats on the new position. Thursday works, but what does your girlfriend have to say about hanging out with your ex? His response came quickly. Not much since I'm single. How about Grace Hill Roasters at 10 a.m.? Tessa's breath caught again. Single. Julian was single. She managed to type back. Sounds good. See you then. She set her phone down with shaking hands and pulled the blanket up to her chin, trying to ignore the way her stomach flipped at the thought of seeing Julian again. Thursday morning, Tessa arrived at the coffee shop early to find Julian was already there. He looked unfairly handsome in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. He stood when he saw her, that familiar brilliant smile lighting up his face. Tessa, wow, you look amazing. Thanks. She slid into the seat across from him, hyper aware of every motion. You look well. California obviously agreed with you. The weather was hard to beat, I'll admit. He signaled the waiter and ordered for both of them. A latte for himself, chamomile tea for her. She was surprised he'd remembered her usual order. They fell into easy conversation, and Tessa was reminded viscerally of why she'd fallen so hard for Julian Barrow in the first place. He was charming without being overbearing, asked thoughtful questions, and made her laugh with stories about his disastrous attempts to learn to surf.
"So, tell me about you,"
Julian said, leaning forward with interest. "Not much to tell, but I'm a senior actuary now at Brennan Mutual."
"That's fantastic, Tessa. I always knew you'd go far."
He smiled warmly.
"You always were the smartest person in any room. Still are, I'd bet."
She bit the inside of her cheek to keep from beaming like a girl who just made prom queen. "What about you?" Tessa asked, redirecting. "Leading an entire branch is a big deal. Your family must be proud." He shrugged.
"I suppose, but truth is, I'm not really doing this for their approval. I'm ready for the next chapter, you know? California was great for my 20s, but I'm 30 now. Time to put down roots in a good spot."
The implication hung in the air between them. Tessa's heart was doing aerobics in her chest.
"So you got the dream gig. Come on, what else have you been up to, Tessa? Seeing anyone?"
Tessa thought of Nathan, of their fake dating arrangement with its built-in expiration date. How could she explain that to Julian? She could just imagine the judgment in his eyes, the slight curl of his lip that signaled his disapproval. Julian had always valued success and people who had their lives together. A fake relationship born from desperation wasn't exactly impressive. "No, not really seeing anyone," she said before adding for good measure. "No one serious anyway." It was the truth, technically. They talked for close to an hour. When they'd finished their drinks, Julian insisted on paying despite her protests.
"This was nice, Tessa."
He touched her arm lightly.
"I've missed this. Missed you, if I'm being really honest. We should do it again soon. Maybe dinner next time?"
Her rational brain was screaming warnings. This man had broken her heart once before. He'd chosen his career over her without a second thought. But then again, he'd bought a house and he said he wanted to lay down roots. "That sounds really nice," she heard herself say. Julian's smile was dazzling.
"Great, I'll text you."
Tessa walked to her car in a daze, her mind spinning. She slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Chapter 8. Tonight was it, their third and final date. After this, their arrangement would technically be fulfilled. They could both truthfully tell their families they were seeing someone come Thanksgiving, and then, what? Part ways with a friendly wave and go back to being strangers who occasionally ran into each other at speed dating events? The thought made Nathan's chest ache. Nathan had considered dozens of options for their next date before settling on the perfect choice. Brushstrokes and bottles, a paint and sip event at a local art studio. He arrived at the studio early, palms embarrassingly sweaty as he claimed a table near the back, where the lighting was softer, and the noise of the crowd wouldn't drown out their conversation. The studio had been arranged with long rows of tables, each spot set with a canvas, brushes, and a palette of pre-mixed paints. Bottles of wine lined the table near the entrance, and soft jazz played through the speakers. He wiped his palms again. What was wrong with him? He could handle one date with Tessa Smith. Except this wasn't just any date. This was his final chance to figure out if what he felt was reciprocated, or if he'd spent the last month falling for someone who was just counting down the days until their arrangement ended. He was deep in contemplation when Tessa walked in. She'd worn a soft gray sweater that somehow made her green eyes brighter, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her usual professional style. When she spotted him and smiled, Nathan felt his earlier tension melting away. Well, this promises to be an interesting night, she said, settling into the seat beside him. I should tell you now, my artistic abilities peaked in 3rd grade.
Perfect. That's exactly my target audience at work,
he joked. Once the rest of the class arrived, the instructor called everyone's attention and began walking them through the first steps. Sky, then hills, then trees. Nathan found himself only half listening, too aware of Tessa beside him, noticing the way she bit her lower lip in concentration as she mixed blue and white for her sky. They fell into an easy rhythm, working on their paintings while trading stories. She glanced at his canvas, where he was already painting trees well ahead of the rest of the class. Show off, Tessa muttered.
Years of practice. Don't worry, though. Yours has personality.
She glowered at him, then smiled mischievously, opening her mouth to deliver a retort when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her mouth dipping into the slightest frown, before her face smoothed into practiced neutrality. Sorry, she said, tucking the phone away. Just a text.
No worries. Emergency at work?
No, nothing like that. Just a friend. She picked up her brush again, but her movements had lost their earlier ease. Nathan told himself he was imagining the slight emphasis on friend, and imagining the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes. They continued painting, but the comfortable atmosphere had fractured. Tessa's responses grew shorter, her laugh less genuine. She was going through the motions, but the warmth had drained from her voice. At dinner afterward, at a small Mediterranean joint nearby, she seemed to realize her change in mood and made an effort at rallying. They ordered falafel and hummus, stuffed grape leaves and grilled vegetables. The food was good, the atmosphere relaxed, but despite her efforts at conversation, the strange distance remained. Tessa was present, but not entirely there. Her mind was clearly somewhere else. By the time they finished eating, Nathan had abandoned his original plan entirely. He'd spent the last week building up to this moment, rehearsing different ways to tell her the truth, that dating had stopped being fake for him, that he wanted to keep seeing her past Thanksgiving. But watching her distant expression now, he knew the timing was wrong. Whatever was going on in her head, she wasn't in a place to hear it.
Hey,
he said finally, after the waiter had cleared their plates.
You okay?
What? Yeah, I'm fine. The response came too quickly.
Tess.
She didn't seem to register his teasing use of her nickname. I have just got a lot on my mind lately. Nathan didn't push. Instead, he signaled for the check. They walked to her car, paintings tucked under their arms. The streetlights cast long shadows across the parking lot, and Nathan's chest felt tight with all the words he wasn't saying.
So the community center is having this thing. The fall classes are ending soon, and the kids are doing an exposition of their art. There's also a fundraiser for the center, the silent auction, that sort of thing. Would you want to come? It's the week after Thanksgiving.
Tessa looked up at him, surprised.
And before you say anything, remember, per the terms of our agreement, it's not a date. Just hanging out as friends.
He added quickly, smiling at her. She chuckled. Right, gotta stick by those rules, huh? Was that disappointment in her voice, or was he imagining it?
But if you'd want to come, I'd really like that. You could meet the kids, see what I actually do all day, but no pressure, though. I know it's probably not your scene.
He was rambling now, unable to stop. Nathan. She touched his arm lightly and he fell silent. I'd love to come, really. It sounds like fun. Text me the details? He nodded. They stood there for a moment, and Nathan thought about closing the distance between them, about trying again for that kiss they'd almost shared on his couch.
Get home safe, Tessa,
he said instead. He watched her climb into her car, watched her pull out of the parking lot, and then disappear down the street. Next time he saw her, he'd tell her the truth. He could only hope she felt the same way. Chapter 9. It was the best dinner Tessa had ever had. A multi-course tasting menu that began with seared scallops on a bed of cauliflower puree, followed by a duck confit with cherry gastrique. Each dish arrived like a work of art, explained in detail by their attentive server.
2015 was a remarkable year for Bordeaux. The wine is exceptional tonight,
Julian said, swirling the wine in his glass with practiced ease. Tessa nodded, taking a sip. It was good, probably great, if she knew enough about wine to appreciate the difference. It's delicious, she said, because she needed to say something. He smiled at her across the candlelit table.
I wanted tonight to be special. It's not every day you get a second chance with someone who got away.
Her heart should have fluttered. Why then did it feel like she was watching the scene unfold from a distance? Julian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. His palm was warm, his grip firm and assured.
I mean that. These past few years I've dated plenty of women, but none of them had what you have. That brilliant mind.
He paused, stroking her hand with his thumb.
That beautiful smile.
Tessa felt herself smile automatically, the same way she used to smile when Julian complimented her in college. Back then, his approval had felt like winning a prize. But now she found herself thinking about pie crusts and paint-splattered aprons. Stop it, she told herself firmly. Focus. She was being ridiculous. This was a picture-perfect evening. The food was exquisite, the atmosphere romantic. She should be grateful, excited even. Their server appeared to clear their plates and describe the next course, a palate cleanser of champagne sorbet with fresh mint before dessert arrived.
I've been thinking,
Julian said once they were alone again.
There's a gala coming up, a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Very black tie, very fancy. I'd love to have you as my date.
That sounds wonderful, Tessa said, automatically. Julian's smile widened.
Excellent. I should mention my parents will be there. They'd love to see you again.
Tessa's eyes snapped up. If he was bringing her around his parents again, it meant Julian was serious about this. Yeah, it would be great to say hi. It's been so long after all, she heard herself say.
Perfect.
Julian lifted his wine glass in a small toast. Tessa smiled and touched her glass to his, when a flash of movement caught her eye. A waiter weaving between tables, his dark hair pulled back in a bun. For one irrational second, she thought it was Nathan. But then the waiter turned. Tessa let out a breath, pressing her napkins to her lips, trying to collect herself. This was absurd. She was on a perfect date with a man who was actually interested in a future with her, and she couldn't stop thinking about Nathan Munch. Bad enough that Nathan had to deal with her being distracted at their last date. She'd tried so hard to stay present during the paint and sip event, but her mind was picking apart the text from Julian that was burning a hole in her phone. Dessert arrived. A deconstructed tiramisu with gold leaf and something the server called coffee caviar. It was delicious, just like everything else they'd eaten. After the meal, Julian's hand settled on her lower back as he guided her toward the exit. The November air hit her like a slap, sharp and bracing. Tessa breathed it in, grateful the sudden shock had interrupted her muddled thoughts. That was wonderful, she said, because it had been, objectively. Thank you again, Julian.
My pleasure.
He smiled down at her, his hand still resting on her back.
This is just the beginning, Tessa. We've got a lot of lost time to make up for.
They walked toward his car, a sleek Lexus, their footsteps echoing on the pavement. The restaurant was in the historic district, all brick buildings and old-fashioned street lamps that cast pools of golden light. Movement flickered at the edge of her vision. A man emerging from a shop across the street. Dark hair, casual jacket. Was that Nathan? No, get it together, she told herself viciously. What is wrong with you today?
Everything okay? Julian asked, following her gaze.
Oh, yeah, fine. I just thought I saw someone I knew, that's all. They reached his car, but instead of opening the door for her, Julian turned to face her, his expression soft in the lamplight.
I had a really wonderful time tonight, Tessa.
He stepped closer, and Tessa's pulse quickened. This was it. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing along her jawline.
Been waiting to do this all night.
He kissed her. His lips were warm, his technique practiced and confident. It should have been perfect. It should have made her knees weak and her heart race. A voice cut through the night air. Tessa, is that you? They broke apart. Tessa's heart sank as she recognized that voice. Her mother. Anne Smith stood 20 feet away on the sidewalk, shopping bags dangling from her arms, her eyes wide with delighted shock. She hurried toward them, her heels clicking loudly. I was just picking up some things for the house. I could not believe. Julian Barrow. Her mother's face was radiant as she reached them. Julian, how wonderful to see you. You look fantastic.
Mrs. Smith?
Julian smiled warmly, shaking her hand. Anne Smith practically glowed. Oh, stop. You know to call me Anne. But look at you two. She gestured between them, her excitement barely contained. Tessa, why didn't you tell me you and Julian were seeing each other again? Tessa opened her mouth, but her mother barreled on. This is just... Oh, I'm so happy. You two were always so perfect together. I told everyone, didn't I tell everyone, that you two would find your way back to each other eventually? She beamed at Julian. You know, you're welcome to come to Thanksgiving dinner this year. We'd love to have you.
That's very kind, Anne.
Julian's arm slid around Tessa's waist, casual and claiming.
But I've got plans with family. Maybe we can arrange something around Christmas.
They chatted for a few more minutes, her mother asking about Julian's new position, while Tessa stood there feeling like an actor who'd forgotten her lines. Finally, mercifully, her mother glanced at her watch and exclaimed about how late it was. I'll let you two get back to your evening. She squeezed Tessa's arm, her eyes sparkling. We'll talk tomorrow, sweetheart. I want to hear everything. She hurried off with a final wave, leaving Tessa and Julian alone again.
Your mother's as lovely as ever,
Julian said.
She's enthusiastic. She's happy for us, and she should be,
he smiled down at her.
This is good, Tessa. This is right. You feel it too, don't you?
Did she? Tessa looked up at Julian's handsome face, at his confident smile, and tried to feel what she was supposed to feel. It's been a perfect evening, she said instead. Julian seemed satisfied with that answer. He kissed her again, briefly this time, then opened his car door for her. Tessa didn't remember the date conflict until she was home, changed into pajamas, and mindlessly scrolling through her phone before bed. She pulled up her calendar and her stomach dropped. Julian's gala. It was the same night as Nathan's community center event. She'd told Nathan she'd be there, and now she'd just agreed to another event on the exact same night. Tessa paced her room, realizing her agitation was about more than just being double booked. Nathan Munch had gotten under her skin, and while he clearly wanted to, at the very least, be friends beyond their 3-date agreement, she wasn't sure friendship with him was enough. Then again, how could she be entertaining thoughts of Nathan when she was running around kissing Julian? Well, he had kissed her, technically. She pulled out a pen and paper. The situation called for one thing: analysis. Tessa spent the next 20 minutes writing down pros and cons for relationships with Julian versus Nathan. When she'd set down her pen, the logical answer was obvious. Julian offered everything she wanted: stability, success, a future she could count on. He was ready to commit and build something real. And Nathan offered what? A few good laughs and some warm, fuzzy feelings? Feelings were unreliable. Julian was the smart choice, the safe choice. She pulled out her phone and started typing. "Hey, Nathan, I'm so sorry, but something's come up for next week. I won't be able to make it to the community center fundraiser after all." Her thumb hovered over the send button. Feelings are unreliable, she reminded herself. Tessa hit send before she could change her mind. The response came quickly, just a simple, "No worries, these things happen." Tessa set her phone down and stared at her pro-con list until the words blurred together. Chapter 10. Nathan stared at the old text message until the screen went dark. He'd gotten it 3 days ago. "Hey, Nathan, I'm so sorry, but something's come up for next week. I won't be able to make it to the community center fundraiser after all." He should have seen it coming. Actually, he had seen it coming. Literally. 3 days ago, when he'd been walking back to his car after picking up some early Christmas gifts, he'd spotted her across the street. At first, all he'd registered was how stunning she looked. Her dark hair had been curled in soft waves, and she wore a deep blue dress that hugged her elegantly. He'd been about to call out to her when he noticed the man beside her. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a cologne ad. The man had placed his hand on Tessa's back with easy familiarity as they walked toward a sleek car. Then he'd leaned in and kissed her. Nathan had turned and walked in the opposite direction. He told himself it was fine. They'd had their 3 dates, their arrangement was over. Tessa was free to see whoever she wanted. He had no right to feel anything about it. Except he did feel something. A lot of somethings, actually. None of which he particularly wanted to examine. He considered going back to the Thirsty Badger next month for speed dating, but the thought of forced small talk with strangers made his stomach turn. He didn't want to meet anyone else. The idea of trying to feel something for another person when Tessa had taken up residence in every corner of his mind felt exhausting, impossible even. His feelings for her were too raw, too present. Everyone else would just pale in comparison. His wallowing was interrupted by a knock on the door. Nathan stood reluctantly and answered it, finding Gigi standing in his doorway, one hand on her hip. "I need my pie tins back." "Hello to you, too," he muttered. She stepped inside, then paused, brows furrowing at his expression. "Why do you look like someone kicked your puppy?" Nathan considered deflecting, but what was the point? "You're going to win the bet." Gigi's eyebrows shot up. "What?" "I'm done with speed dating. Not going back." "You're not seriously going to give up and let me win?" She studied him more carefully. "What's really going on?" Nathan let out a long breath. "The girl I was seeing, it's not gonna work out." "What happened? I thought things were going well." "They were, or I thought they were, but then I saw her with someone else a few days ago." Gigi's expression darkened. "She was cheating on you? Nathan, that's—" No, it's not like that." He held up his hands. "Then what is it like?" Nathan rubbed his face, debating how much to tell her. Finally, he said, "We weren't actually dating. Not really." "Dude, you're not making sense." Nathan sighed, then relayed the whole story. How he'd agreed to the holiday dating pact and then accidentally fallen for Tessa. "I'm an idiot," Nathan concluded miserably. "You're not an idiot." Gigi's voice softened. "But Nathan, does she know how you actually feel?" "What difference would it make?
You should have seen the guy I saw her with. Expensive suit, fancy car, the whole package. He's clearly got everything going for him. I can't butt in and ruin her chance at happiness."
"That's very noble of you," Gigi said, then added more sharply, "and also very stupid." Nathan looked at her. "What? It is. You're just assuming she'd choose this other guy without even telling her how you feel. Maybe she doesn't know she has a choice to make."
"She made it clear she wasn't looking for a relationship with me from the beginning. Telling her I caught feelings will only make her feel guilty."
"I'm sorry, Nathan. I really am." She left him to mope as she walked over to the kitchen in search of her pie tins, before flouncing back over to the couch, the tins tucked under her arm. "For what it's worth, you weren't an idiot for falling for her. But I do think you're one for not being honest about how you feel." She began walking towards the door, then stopped and pivoted. "And also, just because you're feeling depressed doesn't mean you get to skip out on the consequences for losing our bet. I'm thinking I make you run the polar bear 5K in a chicken suit," he chuckled.
"Get out, Georgiana."
Chapter 11. Tessa smoothed down the front of her emerald green gown for the third time, watching the valet drive away with her car. The hotel loomed before her, all marble columns and gold accents, its grand entrance glowing with warm light that spilled onto the circular driveway. Through the towering glass doors, she could see crystal chandeliers and women in designer gowns gliding past like elegant swans. A uniformed doorman pulled open the heavy door with a practiced smile. The lobby was impressive. Soaring ceilings, elaborate floral arrangements. Tessa spotted Julian near the coat check, looking impeccable in a tailored tuxedo as he stood amongst elaborate floral arrangements under the soaring ceilings of the hotel lobby. "There you are," he smiled, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "You look stunning. Ready to make an entrance?" Julian's hand settled on her lower back, proprietary and familiar, as he guided her toward the ballroom. The gala was everything Tessa had expected, glittering, opulent, and slightly overwhelming. Round tables draped in white linens filled the space, each centerpiece a towering arrangement of white roses and orchids. A live band played soft jazz on a raised stage, and smartly dressed waiters circulated with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres that looked too beautiful to eat. Julian launched immediately into networking mode, steering her from group to group. The evening was a blur of names and firm handshakes. He introduced her to colleagues, clients, friends. "And this is Tessa Smith," he'd say. "She's a senior actuary at Brennan Mutual. Brains and beauty. I'm a lucky man." It would have felt like a compliment, had he not said it in a way that made her feel like a new accessory he'd acquired. They gravitated toward a group near the bar, 2 couples in their 30s, the men in expensive suits and the women dripping in jewelry that caught the light with every gesture. "Julian," one of the men said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Good to see you." More introductions, more handshakes, more champagne pressed into her hand. The conversation eventually drifted to television. One of the women was raving about Severance. "The symbolism is just incredible," she gushed. "Every frame is so intentional. You have to watch each episode twice to catch all the layers. I love a show that makes me think." "Have you seen Mindhunter?" Julian asked. "The psychological complexity is fascinating." Tessa's mind tuned out of the conversation as they continued competing to see who could sound the most intellectual about their entertainment choices. She felt something prickle inside her chest, and before she could stop herself, she said, "You know a show I really love? Gilmore Girls." The conversation stuttered to a halt as 5 pairs of eyes turned to her. "Gilmore Girls? I haven't watched that since I was about 13. One of the women giggled, as if Tessa had just announced her favorite hobby was collecting toenail clippings. "Yeah, well, you should give it a rewatch."
Tessa felt heat creeping up her neck, but pushed forward. "I think it's smart and funny and full of heart." She could feel Julian's hand tighten slightly on her back. When she glanced at him, his smile hadn't wavered, but something in his eyes had gone flat. His jaw was too tight, his posture too rigid. She knew that look. He was embarrassed. "Well," one of the men said after an uncomfortable pause. "Different strokes, I suppose." The conversation moved on, but Tessa was no longer listening. She was remembering. She recalled Julian's expression when she'd ordered a margarita at that upscale steakhouse during their senior year instead of the wine he'd suggested. He'd smoothly changed her order to a Pinot Grigio before the waiter could leave. She remembered the time she'd mentioned in front of his friends that she didn't really follow politics closely, how he'd laughed at her, then spent the next month helping her develop informed opinions that happened to align perfectly with his own. And then there was the way he'd gradually managed to steer her away from her favorite rom-com movies in favor of important films. How he'd gently mock her taste in music until she stopped mentioning what she actually liked. The ballroom suddenly felt too hot, too crowded, the air too thick to breathe properly. "Excuse me," Tessa murmured. "I need some air." "Are you all right?" Julian's hand on her arm was concerned, but also restraining. "We should probably make our way towards my parents soon. They'll want to say hello." "I just need a minute. I'll be right back." She extracted herself before he could protest and made her way through the crowd toward the French doors she'd spotted earlier. They opened onto a large balcony overlooking the hotel's gardens, and Tessa stepped out gratefully into the cool night air. The balcony was decorated with potted topiaries arranged to create intimate seating areas. Tessa found a bench tucked behind one of the larger planters and sank onto it, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. The realization sat heavy in her chest. Julian didn't love her. He loved the idea of her. A beautiful, accomplished woman he could shape into his ideal companion. Someone who would enhance his image, agree with his opinions, and never embarrass him with something as gauche as enjoying a show about a coffee-obsessed single mom and her daughter. Worse, she'd been willing to go along with it for so many years. The French doors opened and Tessa tensed, expecting Julian. But the voices that drifted toward her were female and unfamiliar. "Ugh, I'm so glad it's break time. I hate being around stuffy people." "Tell me about it," another voice agreed. There was a pause then. "Oh, hold on, got to answer this text." Tessa peered through a gap in the topiary. Two servers, in black and white uniforms, stood at the far end of the balcony, leaning against the railing. She narrowed her eyes. The one holding the phone looked oddly familiar. "Everything okay?" the first server asked. The second woman tucked her phone away. "Yeah, it's just my brother Nathan being a doofus. He's crazy about some chick he agreed to fake date." Tessa's breath caught. The first server laughed. "Fake dating? Are you serious?" "Yeah, that was my reaction." Tessa stared at what she could only assume was Nathan's sister. The family resemblance was striking now that she could place it. The sister shook her head. "He's doing some fundraiser for the community center tonight. Just texted me to let me know she didn't show. I told him to just tell her how he felt, but does he listen? No. He just mopes around like some tragic hero." "Men," the other server said with an eye roll. They chatted for another minute before heading back inside, leaving Tessa alone with the sound of her heartbeat thundering in her ears. Nathan liked her, wanted to be with her. She hadn't imagined it, and she'd canceled on him to be here, at a gala with a man who wanted to sand down all her rough edges until she was as smooth and polished and interchangeable as everyone else in that ballroom. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Tessa pushed herself up,
gripping the edge of the bench for support as everything she thought she wanted rearranged into something else entirely. She made her way back inside on shaking legs. The ballroom seemed even more garish. She spotted Julian immediately. He was scanning the crowd, probably looking for her. When his eyes landed on her, relief crossed his face. He strode over, hand already reaching for her waist. "There you are. Feeling better?" He didn't wait for an answer. "Come on, my boss just arrived. I want you to meet him before dinner starts." His hand on her back propelled her forward through the crowd. Tessa let herself be guided, her mind still reeling, as Julian led her toward a silver-haired man holding court near the silent auction tables. Chapter 12. Nathan stood in the community center's main hall, surrounded by colorful artwork and the excited chatter of families admiring their children's creations. Normally, this was his favorite night of the year. Seeing the community come together to support the center had always inspired him. Tonight, though, he felt like he was on autopilot. He'd been at the event for 2 hours now, making small talk, complimenting artwork, and thanking donors, all while acutely aware that Tessa wasn't coming. He shouldn't have invited her. The arrangement was over. She'd moved on. He needed to do the same. "Nathan!" His boss, Kathy, waved him over to where she stood with a group of donors. "Please come tell the Hendersons about our spring plans." Nathan plastered on his professional face and joined them, launching into his practiced pitch about adding pottery wheels and expanding the teen program. The Hendersons nodded enthusiastically, asking thoughtful questions that he answered on autopilot. "Oh, that sounds wonderful," Mrs. Henderson said warmly. "We'd love to contribute." "Kathy can help you with that, I'm sure," Nathan said, gesturing toward his boss. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on the refreshment table." He needed a moment to breathe. The refreshment table was fine, of course. Nathan walked towards the back of the gymnasium and leaned against the wall, watching the scene unfold before him. The Jackson twins were dragging their father toward their collaborative painting of a dragon. Mrs. Chen was taking approximately 1,000 photos of her son standing proudly beside his clay sculpture. He spied his friend Benny, who had showed up to support him, but was now currently engaged in what looked like a flirtatious conversation with a single mom. "Hey, man." Jasper appeared at his elbow, holding 2 cups of punch. He offered one to Nathan. "Thought you'd want some company sulking. Fair warning, this punch is aggressively sweet." Nathan accepted the cup anyway. "I'm not sulking." "Right, you're just radiating joy and enthusiasm. Hey, man, I'm allowed to have an off night." Jasper studied him for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. "All right, dude, I've hit my emotional support limit for the week. We talked about your feelings. I gave you the whole she doesn't know what she's missing speech, and honestly, I think I was pretty good at it. But now," he clapped Nathan on the shoulder, "now we're done wallowing. Did you see that kid's painting of a cat? Pretty sure it has 6 legs. Nathan chuckled. "Call it abstract expressionism." "Nah, I'm calling it a mutant cat." The next hour crawled by. Nathan smiled and nodded through more conversations, then helped Kathy count the silent auction proceeds, the numbers blurring together as he tried to focus. "Oh, we're almost at our goal," Kathy said, beaming. "Just about 200 short. This has been a wonderful turnout." Nathan managed to smile. "That's great." "Why don't you help me gather everyone?" Kathy suggested. Nathan nodded and moved through the gymnasium, letting families know it was time for the announcements. People began congregating near the small stage at the front of the room, a low murmur of anticipation filling the space. Nathan positioned himself toward the back, near the side exit, his arms crossed as he watched Kathy climb the steps to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," Kathy's voice rang out cheerfully. "Before we wrap up this wonderful night, I wanted to thank you all for..." The main doors opened. Nathan glanced over along with most of the crowd. His heart stuttered. Tessa stood in the doorway. She was wearing a floor-length gown the color of emeralds, her hair swept up in an elegant style that certainly didn't belong at a community center fundraiser. Her heels clicked on the linoleum as she stepped inside, and every head in the room swiveled toward her. The entire crowd fell silent, even Kathy trailing off mid-sentence. Tessa froze under the weight of dozens of curious stares, her cheeks flushing as she scanned the room. Then her eyes found Nathan's. Relief flooded her face. She started moving toward him, weaving between families who parted to let her through, all of them openly staring at the woman in the evening gown. Nathan couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He could only watch her approach, with his heart pounding against his ribs. Kathy cleared her throat into the microphone.
Well, looks like we have a fashionably late arrival.
Light laughter rippled through the crowd as attention shifted back to the stage.
As I was saying, thank you all for making tonight such a success.
Tessa reached Nathan's side, slightly breathless. "Hi," she whispered. Nathan's brain had apparently forgotten how to form words. "You're here." She glanced down at her dress, a self-conscious gesture. "Here, yes, but a little overdressed." Before Nathan could respond, Kathy's voice boomed through the speakers.
And now for our silent auction winners. First up, we have the beautifully hand-woven antique basket donated by the Miller family.
Nathan barely heard her. His entire focus was on Tessa standing beside him, so close their arms were touching. "Nathan," Tessa whispered, leaning in slightly. "I need to talk to you." People around them were clapping as someone jogged up to the stage to claim their prize. Kathy was already announcing the next item. Nathan took Tessa's hand without thinking, her fingers cold in his. He tugged her gently toward the side exit, trying to be subtle as they slipped away from the crowd. No one seemed to notice, all eyes on Kathy and the steady stream of winners collecting their prizes. The side door led to a small courtyard, little more than a concrete patio with a few benches and some planters that would bloom in spring but were bare now. The November air hit them like a wall of ice. Tessa wrapped her arms around herself immediately, shivering. "Why don't you have a coat?" Nathan asked, shrugging off the navy blazer he'd worn to look somewhat professional tonight. He stepped closer and draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her, too big and probably not warm enough for her bare arms, but she pulled it tight around herself anyway.
"Well, I was in a bit of a hurry to leave the gala."
She laughed, but it came out shaky, either from cold or nerves. Nathan couldn't tell.
"Turns out epiphanies don't wait for practical things like winter gear."
She threaded her arms through the jacket. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at him. "Anytime," he answered automatically. They stood looking at one another for a few moments before she took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something. Well, actually, several things." She took a small step closer. "And I need you to let me get through them before you say anything." Nathan nodded, not trusting himself to speak anyway. "Okay, when I first proposed our fake dating arrangement, I just wanted to make the holidays a bit easier, you know? Avoid the pity and the questions and my mother's disappointed looks. I thought I had you completely pegged, just some flaky artist who didn't take anything seriously." Nathan let out an amused huff, recalling their early speed dating encounters. "But then I got to know you," she continued, her voice softening, "and I realized I'd been so wrong about you. You're thoughtful and kind, and you've built this whole life doing what you love while still being responsible about it. You challenged me in ways I didn't expect. You've made me laugh, made me think." She paused, wrapping his jacket tighter around herself. "And it wasn't long before I started seeing you as a real friend. Then my ex came back into my life. Julian, her words sped up, as if caught in the whirlwind of explanation. We dated in college. He was everything I was supposed to want, successful, polished, from a good family. When he reached out wanting to reconnect, she trailed off, looking down at her feet. I was at a gala his bank was throwing tonight, she admitted. I should have told him no when I realized it conflicted, that I'd already committed to being here, but I didn't. You deserved better than that. Nathan felt horrible. She'd given up a fairy tale evening with her boyfriend because she felt guilty for ditching him. This was exactly what he was trying to avoid by withholding his feelings from her.
Tessa, you shouldn't feel guilty about backing out of attending the fundraiser. I mean, how could you not? A big fancy gala versus some rinky-dink community center event? Of course you chose the gala. I would if I were in your shoes.
He tried for a smile that didn't quite land.
And honestly, Tessa, if reconnecting with your ex makes you happy, then I'm happy for you. You don't owe me anything.
Wait, I'm not done. She looked up at him with determination. I don't want to reconnect with Julian. Nathan froze. Tonight at the gala, I finally understood something. Julian doesn't want a real partner. He just wants this perfectly polished reflection of himself. Someone who likes the right things and says the right things. Someone who's always in alignment, and I don't want to be that girl. Nathan wanted to reach for her, but kept his hands shoved in his pockets. Afraid if he moved, he'd wake up from whatever dream this was. Julian can't make me happy, Tessa said firmly. Being with you feels risky and unpredictable and not at all like something I can control or calculate, and that terrified me. But I realized tonight that I don't want control. I want something real. Nathan, this past month with you has been the most honest I've felt in years. You make me laugh when I'm taking myself too seriously. You encourage me to be true to myself. You like me even when I'm argumentative and overthinking everything. You've been a real friend.
Friend,
Nathan muttered.
Tessa, I want to be more than that,
Nathan said quietly. I know. Her eyes were bright. He blanched.
You what?
How? Do you have a sister named Gigi?
Georgiana contacted you?
Nathan exclaimed. No, she was a server at the gala. I overheard her talking about you. He groaned.
Ugh, leave it to Gigi to meddle in my life without even realizing.
Tessa smiled. I'm glad I overheard her. Also, I seem to remember you agreeing not to interrupt me. He laughed and signaled for her to continue. Tessa grinned back at him before taking another deep breath. What I've been trying to say is, I don't want a fake relationship or a temporary arrangement. I want the real thing, with you. If you'll have me? He was stunned into silence.
I like the sound of that, Tessa,
Nathan said at last. Actually, she said, her lips curving into a smile, it's Tess. She rose up on her toes, closing the distance between them. He kissed her then, one hand cradling her face, while the other slid to her waist, pulling her closer. A light snow began to fall around them, but neither noticed or cared. Epilogue. Nathan pulled into his parents' driveway, carefully navigating around his uncle's SUV and Aunt Linda's sedan. The Munch family Thanksgiving was in full swing, judging by the number of cars already crammed onto the property.
Ready?
He asked, glancing at Tessa in the passenger seat. She looked down at the pie carrier balanced on her lap, then back at him with a nervous smile. As ready as I'll ever be. Think this will hold up in the competition?
Absolutely, Nathan grinned. Our apple butter pie is going to blow everyone away.
They'd spent the previous evening in his apartment kitchen, working side by side on their competition entry. Tessa had perfected the crumble, while Nathan handled the custardy apple butter filling. Before he could reach for the doorknob, Gigi yanked the door open. Finally. She ushered him inside with exaggerated urgency. Food's almost done and I'm hungry. Nathan, Mom needs backup in the kitchen. Gigi grabbed Tessa's arm. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone. Otherwise, Nathan'll just keep you to himself. Tessa shot Nathan an amused look as she was dragged away. He made his way to the kitchen where his mother was orchestrating the final stages of dinner prep with the precision of a military commander. Nathan, thank goodness. Carol thrust a wooden spoon at him. Stir the gravy and don't let it lump. Nathan took his post at the stove, falling into the familiar rhythm of family chaos. His father breezed through, snagging a roll and getting his hand swatted by his mom. Through the doorway, he could hear Gigi's voice rising above the chatter in the living room, no doubt regaling Tessa with some embarrassing childhood stories. So, things seem serious with you and Tessa? His mother said, casually, as she basted the turkey one final time. They are, Nathan said, keeping his eyes on the gravy. She's wonderful. Your father and I really like her. Carol closed the oven door and turned to face him fully. You're happy? Yeah, Mom, I really am. Carol's expression softened. Oh, good. That's all we want for you, sweetheart. She squeezed his arm, then raised her voice. Tom! Get everyone to the table. Turkey's ready. The next 20 minutes were a flurry of activity as the extended Munch family converged on the dining room. Extra chairs were squeezed in, children were corralled into their seats, and serving dishes made their way down the long table family style. Nathan found himself seated between Tessa and his father, directly across from Gigi, who kept shooting him knowing looks that he steadfastly ignored. Dinner was loud, chaotic, and perfect. Stories were told and retold, jokes were made at various family members' expense, and the food was devoured with enthusiastic appreciation. Tessa fit seamlessly into the chaos, laughing at his uncle's terrible puns and holding her own in a spirited debate with his cousin. Nathan watched her, his chest tight with affection. A year ago, she'd been so worried about fitting in, about saying the wrong thing. Now she was arguing about casseroles with his family like she'd been doing it her whole life. Finally, about an hour after the dishes were cleared, Tom Munch stood and announced, "It's time for the annual Munch Family Pie Competition." Cheers erupted as everyone migrated back to the dining room, where the competition table had been set up. Pies crowded the surface in an impressive spread, each labeled with the baker's name and type. "This year we have 9 entries," Tom announced. "Everyone will vote for their top 3 choices, write your selections on the card in front of you, and Carol will tally the results." He paused for dramatic effect. "May the best pie win." The next 20 minutes were a sugar-fueled frenzy. Family members moved from pie to pie, debating, sampling, and occasionally going back for second tastes. Nathan watched as various relatives tried their apple butter pie, saw eyes widen in appreciation, and heard murmurs of approval. Finally, all the votes were collected. Carol disappeared into the kitchen to count them while speculation ran wild. "I'm calling it now. Aunt Linda's gonna sweep again," one cousin declared. "Yeah, but Gigi's cherry pie was actually good this year," another countered. "Hey," Gigi protested. Carol returned, her expression carefully neutral as she handed Tom a slip of paper. He studied it, his eyebrows rising. Well, well," he said. "In 3rd place, we have Tina's chocolate pie." Nathan's cousin took a modest bow while applause rippled around the room. "In 2nd place," Tom drew out the pause, clearly enjoying himself, "Gigi's cherry pie." "Yes!" Gigi pumped her fist in the air. "And now," Tom continued, "for the first time in Munch family history, we have a tie for 1st place between Linda's pecan tart and Nathan and Tessa's apple butter pie." "Recount!" someone called, and laughter erupted. Folks began to mill about. A football game was sure to be turned on. "Wait, hold on. Nathan said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Before we move on, I have something to say." The room went still. Every face turned toward him. Nathan pivoted to Tessa, whose smile had frozen in place, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "Tess," he began, "when I met you, I thought you were the most determined, impossible woman I'd ever known, and somehow the one I couldn't stop thinking about. I've been so lucky to have you in my life this past year, and I kick myself knowing I could have asked you out 10 months sooner when we first met at that speed dating event."
"I wouldn't have said yes," Tessa quipped, as Nathan's family chuckled.
"No, you wouldn't have then, but I'm glad you took a chance on me when you did. Somewhere in those first few dates, between arguing about corn maze trivia and teaching you how to make pie crusts, I realized you were it for me." He released her hand and reached into his pocket, dropping to one knee as gasps erupted around the room when he pulled out the small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple rose gold band with a single diamond. Tessa let out a choked sob. "You turned my world upside down and made it better in every possible way. You're brilliant and stubborn and kind, and I don't want to spend another Thanksgiving without you." He looked up at her, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Tessa Smith, will you marry me?" For a heartbeat, the room was absolutely silent. Then Tessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she managed, her voice breaking. Nathan barely got the ring on her finger before she threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him over as the room exploded in cheers and applause. He caught her, holding tight as she kissed him. When they finally broke apart, the entire family was on their feet. His mother was openly weeping into his father's shoulder. Gigi was jumping up and down, shrieking. Even Aunt Linda was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, beaming. Then they were swarmed. Gigi got there first, throwing her arms around both of them. His mother was next, crying and laughing and already asking about dates and venues. His father clapped him on the shoulder with suspiciously bright eyes. "Welcome to the family, officially," his mom said, wrapping her arms around Tessa. The next hour blurred into a chaos of congratulations and champagne that his father had apparently been saving for a special occasion. Everyone wanted to see the ring, hear the story of how Nathan picked it out. Finally, Nathan managed to extract them both, leading Tessa out onto the back porch where they could catch their breath. The November air was crisp and cold, but the porch light cast a warm glow over the yard. "So that just happened," Tessa said, leaning against him with a smile. "Yeah." Nathan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Any regrets?" "Only that we tied for first place in the pie contest," she joked. Nathan laughed. "Well, there's always next year." He kissed her then, slow and certain and warm against the chill, tasting faintly of apple butter and happiness. When they broke apart, Tessa was smiling through tears she hadn't realized had fallen. Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "Happy Thanksgiving, Tess." "Happy everything," she whispered, before kissing him again. Thank you so much to those of you who have stayed to the end. Y'all, I really had a lot of fun with this story. I love Nathan and Tessa. I've got a soft spot for kind of rivals to lovers or enemies to lovers type of stories. And while I don't think Tessa and Nathan are enemies by any means, I hope that tension between the two of them at the beginning scratched that itch for anyone out there who likes that rivals to lovers trope. I'm also curious what y'all thought. Was Nathan too teasing? Like calling her Tess all the time, knowing she was going to correct him? Although in Nathan's defense, he doesn't do that to just Tessa. He also does it to his sister Gigi when he calls her Georgiana. But let me know, was it endearing or was it annoying? Or was it a little bit of both? Tessa and Nathan remind me of my husband and I a bit. Although we never had the, rivalry or sharpness toward one another at the beginning of our relationship. He is much more creative and artistic than I am, and I'm a lot more analytical and by the numbers. So I wanted to write a story about a couple that had a bit of that dynamic. One of the scenes in the story was partially inspired by a date I had with my own husband. He's a very talented artist, and we once did a Bob Ross painting night as a date. And I can say I have never felt so untalented as when I tried to paint with my husband, who got through multiple paintings before I had even gotten halfway through mine. He made a mini painting at the very end that I still have, and I keep it on my little bedside table. So I'll try and put a picture of that up on the screen for you all to see. Anyways, this is the first of a series of holiday-themed stories. So if you enjoy holiday romance, please consider subscribing, because I have several more holiday stories that will be coming out over the next few weeks. Thank you so much for listening, and stay cozy, friends. Bye!